delighted that you came out in full force to have a conversation with the senior officials in the National Research Foundation, led by the CEO, whom some of you I can see you know from his professional background, and he's accompanied by his deputy CEO, whom I'll talk more about in a short while. I think this is generally part of the roadshow, you said, because Dr. Kobela took over as the NRF under 2 years ago. Obviously, the organization had gone through all the national system of innovation because of obvious externalities that have not reached our 1% of the growth of the investment as a percentage of our GDP hasn't been realized, and so Formula had to basically manage the situation under serious financial pressure, which of course you all are cognizant of. Mulapo is accompanied by Dr. Gansen Pillay, and they're both biochemists and biologists. They're not physicists at the top anymore. Other scientists are concerning. But we will not talk about that for now. I would say that I've known Gansen for many years, as him and I were in the same executive team at the NRF, and of course Mulapo, I joined UCT after Mulapo had just left. So he was my elder brother at UCT when I joined. And so I think Mulapo will just, in the way we choreograph it, could be informal. I think we'll deviate with all from the protocol, because we want to have an exchange. As I mentioned earlier, he's given a similar presentation at the University of Cape Town and other universities, in particular research-intensive universities, of course, where they these discussions of interest. And Gansen is in charge of matters that are germane to this conversation, because he's the head of the Research, Innovation and Support Agency, RISA, which oversees shares, grant funding, research incentive schemes, and so on and so forth. So I think we do have a complete team that will at least clarify some of the issues and answer some of your questions. The way we'll do it is as following. We have budgeted just under about 1.5 hours, 90 minutes. Dr. Kobela will give us a 35-minute presentation, followed by 40 minutes or so of conversation. And I'm sure that afterwards, Dr. Pillay will come through and just basically assist him as well. So, Mulapo, over to you.
Cool. So thanks, colleagues. Yeah, I'll use this one. Contrary to popular belief in some quarters, I don't have a watch. Not even a Breitling watch. Can I borrow this one, thanks? So I just need to make sure I time myself. Colleagues, my name is Mulapo Kobela. I work for you. We do this not because it's something extraordinary. It's what is expected of us. We try and meet with every university at least once a year. Most of the times I meet with the leadership of the university at the level of Vice Chancellor, Deputy Vice Chancellor, and the executive leadership.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Okay. No, I mean, it's when you get a signal, you've got to stop. So what we try and do is to make sure that we are adhering. It's important for an organization such as the National Research Foundation that serves the system to be in tune with the issues that the university system in particular are faced with. Similarly, it's important for us to share information and sometimes to agree on some of the hard choices that we all have to make as we try and make sure that our system is stronger and better. So I'm trying my best to provide a little bit of context, but also to provide information, which will form the basis, hopefully, of our discussion. I start with this slide because it gives you a context of the National Research Foundation in the constellation of a whole range of public sector institutions that support us. And when I'm talking about us, I'm talking about the royal we in the R&D system. And you will see that we work with a whole range of government departments, although we as the National Research Foundation report statutorily to the Minister of Science and Technology. There's a huge amount that we do with the Department of Education Training, with the Department of Energy, with Department of Basic Education and so forth across the road. And so it's important for us to keep that at the back of our mind. Likewise, regulatory bodies, respective sister agencies, and of course, the people who do their hard work, who are the universities. Because the bulk of our research capacity in our country is within the university system. And so in one form or another, we work and have to find creative ways of working in tandem and in sync with all of these institutions. Zebulon had asked me to talk a little bit about what's happening in the national system. I would love to be able to tell you what's happening with the white paper on science and technology, but maybe you can invite Phil Mdracha, the Director General, to come and talk to us about where that white paper is, because 20 years now down the road, we wrote that paper in '96, and it's time for us to reflect and ask ourselves where to, going into the future, hopefully the next 25 years. Higher education training, they came up with a white paper on post-school education training. They're currently drafting a national plan for post-school education training, which is to replace the 2001 white paper, the 2001 national plan for higher education. And you'll remember that this is the instrument that the Department of Higher Education Training uses in more ways than one to manage the university system. The National Advisory Council on Innovation is currently working on a mini foresight on the S&T system. We did a major one in the mid-90s, which informed the '96 white paper. And I think it's important, if we are going to chart a new future for ourselves, recognizing that next year is 25 years of our democracy, we need to be informed, not just about what's happening in our own country, but also what's happening globally. And so that's where the foresight exercise comes in. We're currently working with the Council on Higher Education, and colleagues in the room, I'm sure, are aware that we requested the CHE to help us do a reflection on the back of the work that ASAP did a number of years ago, the consensus report on PhD studies. We're asking a simple question. Are we chasing numbers or are we chasing quality? You probably will know the answer. After all, I'm told I'm just a bureaucrat. But we are putting that question on the table because it's important that for the investment that we've made must yield positive returns, not just merely in numbers, but in substance, more importantly. So these are, like I said, this is the constellation of the institutions that we work with. The second thing that I want to just flag is the National Research Foundation, for those that have long memories, is the successor in part to the Foundation for Research Development. It was born in 1999, statutorily, from the merger of the Foundation for Research Development, the old FRD, and the Center for Science Development, which was the funding arm within the Human Science Research Council. So we brought those together from the National Research Foundation. So we are 20 years next year formally, and our government, in their wisdom, have amended our founding legislation. So keep this at the back of your mind when you start also asking, what is it that this organization should do? To Professor Kupe, I just want to say, one of the things that I found fascinating, I went to Parliament, I think 4 or 5 times on this legislation. And to my disappointment, there was not a single university that was there working with me. Not one. And one of the things that we know our country is going through is an expectation that the state, and particularly the ministries, are having a greater and a more forceful hand over the affairs of public institutions. I mean, we just need to just go back to the amendment to the Higher Education Act a year and a bit ago. And so in the NRF amendment, there is a significant, should I say, authority been given to the Minister of Science and Technology. It's obviously how we exercise that authority that is as important. But our foundation, the object or the mandate, is fundamentally to contribute to national development. There are some very wise people in here who will be able to say, what is our understanding of national development? We do it through these four things. The current legislation, if I were to give you a context, simply is articulated as A. And so we will be working with the sector to do an understanding and an reflection of how we collectively are going to be interpreting the revision to our mandate, and to make sure that we do not lose that we have built over the multiple decades in our national system. By the way, colleagues, these slides are available. I've left copies, and so I'm sure the research office will circulate in public. A little bit of context. If I remember correctly, there are about 150,000. Correct me if I'm wrong. I looked at the targets, enrollment targets to 2019. About 150,000 postgraduate students in our university system. The National Research Foundation currently supports, actually, this year it's less than 12,000. One thing we don't do, we don't fund MBAs, we don't fund postdoctoral diplomas, we don't fund master's diplomas, what else? PGCEs, coursework, etc., etc. Choices that have been made. But even in that context, it is a very small pool that we are looking at. If I remember also correctly, there are in the order of 50-odd thousand research and instructional staff at our universities. We currently reach, through very difficult resourcing, a tiny fraction, less than 4,000. And I'm going to be honest and say those 4,000 are currently quite poorly financially supported. And I'll come back to the hard choices. You can either spread misery, or you can make bold choices about where you're going to invest to ensure that you have enough. And everybody wants a chair, 2, 3, 10, 20. Everybody wants a COE here and there. But the numbers are quite limited. To put a little bit of context, Professor Cooper, you will remind me, WITS as a collective, the size of this enterprise, that's not just the university, but everybody. If I recall correctly, your turnover is what, about 7 billion? 7 billion rand. This one university. In where are we? We're here, 2018, 19. The entire national investment in the Ministry of Science and Technology is 7.9 billion rand. It's a reality check. It's about the size of this university. Okay. Put against, what are we? Let's look at higher education is what? It's what, 30 billion, of which a fair chunk of that is NSFAS. So I'm putting things in context, colleagues, when bullets start flying about money. Okay. You can see the annual movement relative to CPI. The 1 year where we were actually above CPI was in 2015. There was an extraordinary investment that we made because of SKA and our investment in radio astronomy. That was a 16% injection, but almost every other year, this year, we got about 5% in real terms. We're going backwards, and over the years, I can't remember for how long we have been going backwards in real terms. That is a reality. And why the title of the slide is talking about in a resource-constrained environment. We cannot continue to be asked to do more and more and more and more with less and less and less and less in real terms. And this is just with CPI. If we were to add the gyration of the South African rand, it makes that picture even more difficult to look at. Parliament allocates money to public institutions to fulfill their mandate. Those of us that teach public policy at our universities, that's what we are told. In the current financial year, Parliament has appropriated 905 million rand to the National Research Foundation to fulfill its statutory mandate. That is what we are expected to deliver on those four things that are cited as the mandate. 905 million rand, which is probably the size of one of the faculties here. Am I wrong? The bulk of the money that comes to us, and this financial year, let's see, that's that one, 4.3 billion. The bulk of that money. You're shaking your head, Christine.
I can't believe it.
You can't believe it.
I'm translating it into dollars. The cost of one major instrument at Brookhaven.
Yes, yes. And I think, colleagues, I'm sharing this not out of to try and shock us, but it is to put context. Okay? The bulk of that money, of 4.3, which is the budget of the organization, consists of 2.7 billion, which comes to the organization as a formal contract between ourselves and the Department of Science and Technology, whereby they decide on how that money should be spent, for what and when. An example being, in this year, the contract for the SKA project is, I think, about 750 million rand. So you can't move that money out of that space. Okay. And a wee bit of funding that we get from other sources, Department of Higher Education training, and a few other bits and bobs. The take-home message is we are dealing with a very tight fiscal envelope. But what we do need to do, and I raised this at the USAF dialogue, what we need to do is two things. One, and I raised it with the Vice Chancellor, if the government of the Republic can find, for reasons that we shall not go into today, money for undergraduate funding, why is it that we cannot find money for research and postgraduate students? There's no rhyme or reason, because it is about sustaining the health of our system. And our challenge as a collective is to make not just a noise, but to make a compelling case for why that investment needs to change. We have had a target through Minister Pandor when she was Minister of Science and Technology, a target of spending 1.5% of GDP in SMT, and over the years we have struggled to go above 0.75. And the bulk of that is predominantly because the private sector is actually decreasing its investment in R&D. So that's the first thing. Make the case. Agitate. Put a compelling reason for the continuing sustainable health of our university and our research system. Otherwise, Senate Hall will not be filled with the sort of people that this university needs 20 or 30 or 40 years from today if you don't invest in research and postgraduate students. Second is that we've got to make choices. Our GDP, and if we translate it in dollars, we had a BRICS meeting last week? Last week. China is what? I'm told it's $11 trillion. The others are in a trillion. Where are we? In dollar terms? 300 million. Billion. Excuse me. Almost cut us at the In relative terms, we are a small economy. And so we have to make choices about how we get the most out of whatever we have. I won't bore you with this except to say that you will see this axis, 5,000, and that axis has got 500. This is appropriated funding of that 900 million, and this is the other 2.7 billion, and its distribution in terms of next generation students, established researchers, emerging researchers. Strategic is basically centers of excellence, research chairs, etc. And so you can see the distribution for yourself. You can put it slightly differently in terms of the actual expenditure and our projected expenditure. And I'll show you where my nightmare, my worry is. And I suspect you will also have the same one. Over the years, this is students, next generation. That is climbing nicely. It looks good. But I'll come back to that. It can be very deceiving. This is research chairs and centers of excellence. It's climbing nicely. This is actual. And how many research chairs, Kenson? We've got about 233. This is against 4,000 odd other colleagues that are supported. Okay. The emerging category is climbing, but you can see where it is sitting. You can see the change projected into 2019. For students, it's flat. So we're not exactly getting more money for the students that we are supposed to support, and choices have to be made. The steepness of that is slowing down significantly, and it's whether we need to be bold to cap it and possibly move that money elsewhere. This is the current distribution. We spent about 960 million on students, 40%. Oh, sorry, something went wrong. This should be the strategic investment. About the same amount of money that goes to research chairs and centers of excellence. Emerging researchers, 238 million. Other established researchers, 283 million. That's in dollars? Okay. We need to make choices. I'm putting this on the table just to hopefully spur a little bit of discussion later. We've been asking ourselves, what are those 2 things or 3 things that at least keep us awake at night? Contrary to popular belief, we sleep with one eye open. And the first one, for the organization and our system, is the sustainability of our system, based on what I've just been talking about. The sustainability, our ability to perpetually rejuvenate ourselves, and to make sure that that we do actually advances the knowledge agenda that we believe is necessary for the country. And then the second one is the transformation agenda. You will find almost in every organization, you see, now, even the rugby guys, transformation. I don't know about Bafana Bafana, we have a transformation agenda. We sometimes reduce that to simply an issue of race and gender, issues of equity, race and gender. But I think if we are to be bold, we need to start imagining things that are a little bit more imaginative about what it means to transform our knowledge system with that we have at our disposal. So I'm illustrating this by way of example. For a long time, the equity profile has been an issue that has faced us. For the last 25 years, we've experimented, we've done this, we've done that, and so forth and so forth. And the question will be, all right, next year, 25 years of democracy, what is going to be different in the next 25 years? So, we're saying we need to find a creative way, and I'll talk to you a little bit, enhancing the equity of access, success, and throughput of postgraduate students. We cannot allow a situation where somebody comes in and doesn't finish in regulation time and does not deliver quality at the end of the day. It's a choice that we can make. Second one is we need to increase the number and improve the representativity of active, internationally acclaimed researchers, the leading lines of our knowledge system. If we don't do that, we will slowly die. And so those are two examples of issues that we have to do. We must make it possible for somebody who's hungry, who's gifted, and who wants to be someone. We must make it possible, and if necessary, take money away from somewhere and make it possible for that person, if I were to use the rating system, to move from being a postgraduate student to being an A-rated researcher within 20, 25 years at max. And that takes choices. Knowledge enterprise. Knowledge is powerful to transform societies. And so we are asking two simple questions in this instance. The first is, should we simply be giving money for anybody to do whatever they want, anytime, however? Or in an environment of resource constraints, do we have big questions that we want our knowledge system to respond to? That investment is very tight. So again, I hope you will join us in that journey of asking what should be those big questions. Similarly, how do we enhance research excellence in our system? And then, please, colleagues, this is not about another review of the rating system. Not about review of rating. Can we honestly, with absolute certainty and humility, as this organization that I have the privilege of serving, that we are giving research chairs to the best in our system? That's an investment that is significant. Are we advancing research excellence in the manner in which we award research grants? Are we advancing research excellence in the manner in which we are allocating bursaries for postgraduate students? Those are the questions. What other forms of interventions can we bring in? And this is an example of the broader picture of what the CHE is helping us with in terms of doctoral qualifications. Are we chasing numbers, or are we chasing quality? The others are about the relationship between science and society. Why is it that society still has those people? What do they call them? The clever so-and-sos. But as a country which does not respect the value and the importance of knowledge and science in particular, we are doomed. And therefore, it's important for us to make a case for why this country must not just invest in the social grants, but also must invest in knowledge. For us, as a transformation agenda. And clearly, the last one is about us as an organization. You've got to, if you challenge others, you've got to challenge yourself. About 18 months ago, we started a conversation about what are the hard choices that we need to make around postgraduate students. Or should I say postgraduate student funding. And we came up with these 8 recommendations. We started first with the USAF Research and Innovation Strategy Group, where Zebulon sits, and we said, guys, what do you think? He said, yeah, well. And then from there, it went to all our universities. I have yet to come across one university who says we should not do this, because we have gone beyond this to saying we now need to implement these policy choices very quickly. Up to now, financial need is not a criterion that we use. So whether you are Cyril's daughter or you are Makumalo's, not Dharma, not Dharma. You are treated exactly the same. And so what we have always been saying is we are just merely looking at excellence. And I agree. But the daughter of the cleaner, hence why we had this ha-ha about fees must fall, will probably, bright as they may be, will probably never pursue postgraduate studies unless they are given adequate funding to pursue postgraduate. So currently, the maximum value of our honors bursaries is 60,000. That's the highest. Most people get about 20. Yeah. That's crazy. That's madness. And I'm saying this openly, and you can say it, I've said it. It's madness. So why would a young person who inadequately as NSFAS is currently funded be getting 75,000 for undergraduate studies, and then you come and say, you know what, I'm brilliant, I'm gifted, I want to go and do my master's, and then you come and give me 20,000. Okay. So we are saying, if you fall in that category, but you are also bright, and we are currently discussing whether the threshold minimum admission requirement into this program should be 65 or 60% as an average at the undergraduate level. But we want to guarantee you total cost of study, total, from honors to PhD guaranteed as long as you continue performing. Do the same for you if you were a first-class student at the undergraduate level. Let's retain our best. Not all of them are going to come, but let's at least make it possible and say that money is not going to be a barrier. Prioritize full-time study. Okay? So we're not going to fund people who are wanting to do this on a part-time basis. You're working for the Department of Agriculture, and you are now suddenly, oh, you know what, I really want to do my PhD. Pay for yourself. Don't come. What we are interested in is full-time study, people who are focused and who want to complete within regulation time. And you must finish your doctorate no older than 35 years of age. Choices. And of course, the issues of representativity. So these are choices, colleagues, that we are making. We will probably move from that 12,000 students down to possibly, who knows, 8,000. Because some people will get full total cost of study, and those that don't fall in those two categories will get partial. And that partial cost will cover tuition and accommodation. This is the number of us that are currently being supported at the University of the Witwatersrand in the different areas. Emerging research category, 104. This is audited 2016 figures. Total of 479, but there are a lot more than 479 research instructional staff at this university. So we are touching a very small number of us that are here. Robin, you probably have the exact figures for 2017. This is the demographic profile. I'm putting it here, and if Senate is happy with that demographic profile, then I leave it in your good hands. But that's 2016, and that's what the numbers currently look like. And if we want to change it, then we have to make choices. This is in selected funding instruments other than the incentive funding for rated researchers, which caused a lot of noise about 18 months ago. And you will come to realize that it's such a tiny pot of money that it's unreal. Sorry for all these acronyms, but you can see equipment, chairs, Tuchuka. These are the numbers in terms of the number of grants. This is it represented in financial terms. And you'll see obviously the bulk of that goes to researchers at 68 million. Tuchuka under 10 million. What do you do with it? Competitive program for rated researchers, which is that one, 60 million. I'm going very quickly. The arrow points at us. This is funding distribution for competitive program for rated researchers. And one of the things that we're going to be doing, probably starting from next year, is doing what other funding agencies do across the world. Research Councils UK, the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, and many others. We publish the number of grant proposals that we got from any university, the value of their applications, how many were funded, the value of what was funded, so you can see what the success rates is. In some cases, you will find some universities have very low number of applications, high success rates, but a very small amount of money allocated. So if you don't ask for money, you don't get. So this is 77 odd million. This is cumulative, obviously. For that period, the University of the Witwatersrand taking a share of about 12.5% of that total. This is what caused a lot of issues late last year. Incentive funding for rated researchers. It came out of a review that was done in 2007. And coming out of that, there was a decision by the sector, together with the National Research Foundation, to link rating and funding. When I was rated, there was no link. You get a rating, and there was a reason why one applied for rating. It was not to get money. It was for other reasons. To be able to benchmark, to reflect, to ask yourself, am I doing the sort of things that my peers expect me to be doing? And so this tie-up of rating and funding started in 2008. And it's been an interesting is whether the number of individuals that have been rated has risen because of the funding or because when I opened the research annual report of every university, one of the first things that they cite, how many A-rated researchers do we have? How many research chairs do we have? How many centers of excellence do we hold? And maybe those are things that are held in high esteem. And so I doubt if it is being cited as the reason for the funding, but it is cited for other reasons. So the numbers have increased. It's 1,600 to 3,600, 2017, with the significant proportion of A's and B's increasing equally. And when this was started in 2008, it was money that was, should I say, clawed back. I think Robin was still at the NRF at the time. It was clawed back from the focus programs, focused area programs. 72 million, that's where we started. 2011, and I just want to keep your eye, you can look at all of these others, and I'll come back to them in a few seconds because it's actually quite depressing. And you'll help me by, I want to walk out of here, and you're going to say, yes, we agree with you to close some of these things here, so that we can actually consolidate and have real money, and make real money available. Okay, incentive fund for rated researchers, 98 million. It went up to a high, 16 of 137 million. Remember, this is being funded from that 906 million. Remember the 906 that I raised earlier? So out of that 906, in this year, 18, 19, 100 million of that goes purely for incentive funding for rated research. But then you get other absurdities. 17 million for Blue Skies. What do you do with it? That's for an entire country. Competitive program for rated researchers. So what you will see is we are saying, rather, let's consolidate our money into a competitive pool. And let's access that in a competitive manner. And so if you look at it in relation to the ratio that I raised earlier in the competitive program for rated researchers, this is currently accessing 12.5% of the total. And at the moment, you're accessing 12 point, about the same proportion. So our view is the money is not going away, it's not being taken away from us, it is just being put into a different pot in order for us to access it. Number of researchers at BITS. We talked about that number, 347. This is the RAM value. You'll see that's the incentive funding, that's the competitive program. We started with that, and then behavior changed. And the question is whether there's anything wrong with that sort of ratio. Number of students that we currently support. Thanks very much for coming. With a total of about 72 million shares. And again, clearly, if we were to consolidate that number with those policy choices, we are probably going to support fewer, but hopefully we will be able to support more. We'll support them better. Number of, this is equipment. This is one of the most difficult things to actually say in this community. Last year, there was no call for equipment. You know why? Our government allocated 0 rounds for the National Equipment Program. Next year we'll have some, so there'll be a call this year, the next year, but the following year, currently, 0. So that stochastic way of managing a system is not appropriate, and so these are issues that we are raising from a policy level around the need to rethink. So about 55 million came through here. And my concluding remark, colleagues, is simple. We need to make choices, and one of those choices, is about making a case. Make a case. And not just simply say it's good for us to have that 1.5 target, but to say, why is it important? If we can find money for undergraduate students, it's as important, it's even more of an imperative that universities should not become undergraduate mills. Incredibly important. And therefore, the case for proper, adequate support for postgraduate studies and for the research enterprise to be undertaken at the university system. The current average grant value, Jensen, if I remember correctly, is about what, 160 to 180,000 rand. That's why everybody wants a check, because you get a little bit more than that. So we've got to do things slightly differently. This is for us internally to create a far more flexible way of allocating. Instead of 80% of the funds being earmarked, so if you are in radio astronomy, you're very happy. But if you are in, let's make an example, anthropology, yeah, maybe crap around. We need to continue to reflect on the efficacy in the different funding instruments, and so hopefully Senate has supported me when I say we should collapse all those Olanyana things. And hopefully when we do that, there won't be another uproar as to why we are bringing and collapsing, so that they can be a reasonable amount that we are actually accessing. And my last one is, I think, a passion where it's incredibly important that we must self-renew. If we don't make it possible for high potential emerging early career researchers to be supported and enabled to be the future stars of our system, then we are slowly and surely assured of death. Colleagues, I thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mlabo, for the quite a sobering presentation, and I'm sure that to generate a lot of stimulating conversation over the next 35 to 40 minutes or so. I'll just take advantage of my time and start with the leading question. You obviously talk about a situation where you've got a growing cohort against a diminishing source, which obviously doesn't balance, right? It's an unbalanced equation. And I remember at some time in the past that the NRF had a mantra called the agency of choice. So is it possible for the NRF to think beyond just its mother body, the line department, which is the Department of Science and Technology, to look at other departments? Because what might not be spent in one department, like happened, could be used by the NRF. That kind of breaks the silos. Once you're collapsing your own internal silos, yeah, can you also collapse the other internal silos? It becomes a cross-cutting agency that is able to tap into all these departments. I think that is one thing that we can actually add to the core think of.
Yeah. No, I fully agree, as well as tap into the private sector. So one of the things that we are currently doing is we are discussing with ISFAC around how ISFAC can also partner with us around postgraduate student funding. Private sector wants to participate in student funding. Generally, they go to the undergraduate route. And so our conversation is to say it's as important for the private sector, for the health of this country, for some of that money. So Sizwe Ngasana was talking about raising about 14, 15 billion rand a year. Just give us one. Just one. That 1 billion from the private sector will double the current investment that we're making in postgraduate student support. The other government departments, yes, we are pulling. So this year, one of the things that hit us was that the National Skills Fund, which has been supporting postgraduate students through the National Research Foundation at Honours and beyond cut their allocation, because where did that money go? Fees must fall. It went to the undergraduates. So again, it's been taken from one part to another. But we continue to do that.
Thank you, Mlapo. I think Mlapo, don't be offended by kids going back. It's about 2 o'clock, they have to go, some of them have to leave.
So
to the teaching. Yeah.
I'll join you.
We are running short of teaching staff, especially in the Department of School of Animal
Really?
Health.
No, we'll talk.
To use,
I'll go back to honours first.
Okay, colleagues, Rob will help me. We'll take questions in classes of 3. I'll go this way. 1, 2, and Mary. Bruce and Mary. Ha.
Good afternoon. I'm a rated researcher and the research director of the Wits Business School, which is part of the Commerce and Law faculty. So you spoke about death, and I think it's happening quicker than you think. The reason is that the incentive program is no longer here. University is also a resource-constrained environment. So if I want to go to a conference, what do? No more incentive funding. Maybe the CPRR, if that works. Then I go to the faculty, which is also resource constrained. So how do I keep up? How do I keep my human capital up to date?
Thank you. Bruce?
Hi, Bruce Watson, mathematician, rated researcher. Firstly, I come from a discipline where small amounts of money actually go a long way. The incentive grants covered, I'd be rated, it covered most of my research expenses to bring in collaborators and visit collaborators. That has now disappeared. The calls for this year, mathematical sciences have been penalized. They appear not to be a national priority. Climate change, SKA, 101 other things are, but mathematical sciences do not appear there. We are one of the worst performing countries in Africa on mathematics. We rate second last in Africa, yet it's not an objective, and it underlies the rest of science. How are those categories chosen? Thank you.
Bruce, can I correct you there? Because I think there's fact. Number 1, in terms of, I look at the rankings, we have the highest, us in Egypt, the second highest, at postgraduate research level. So they're talking about, don't conflate undergraduate teaching, no. School. No, please. School and research, right?
I know the figures.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to educate me.
But Bruce, you are conflating them, unfortunately. It's unfair. We're talking about research here. I think point taken nonetheless. But let's focus on that point. And then Mary.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Mary Scholes. I have a research chair in systems analysis. 2 points I'd like to make is, one is you emphasized a lot the honours to PhD program and didn't say a word about any of the other individual at any level, the honours level, master's level, postdocs, etc. Is that funding structure going to change as well? And then secondly, you said that we need to invest in high potential emerging and early career researchers and enable them to be established. But there's extensive evidence to show that those programs that are offering that opportunity in this country are not achieving what they can because of the processes put in place by the NRF, which do not facilitate those programs.
We take those 3. Can I start with Mary first? Let me make sure I understand. The postgraduate student policy choices are about postgraduate students up to doctoral level. The idea of us reflecting and asking, what's working? What should we do differently if we want to have another one of you 20 years from now, who is one of your doctoral graduates? And that's the choice that I'm talking about the extent to which we rethink, redesign, reinvent if necessary, reimagine all these different initiatives that we are currently doing, both within the NRF and, if I may add, within our respective universities. It's not just the NRF alone. For this to work, it has to be a partnership between three entities: the funder, the institution, and the individual. It's not going to work if those three don't work in concert. So no amount of money you can put in unless the institution enables and provides that enabling environment for that to happen. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen here at this great university, but I'm just saying it is as a general principle. So I'm hoping when we come back, we'll put those on the table, and then we can discuss about what are the different options and the choices that we need to make. The other two, I think, were partly related to the incentive funding issue. Mats?
Incentive and how the national strategy areas are chosen on the grants.
Those, and that's why I kept starting with the context. Regrettably, those are choices that are made by our Department of Science and Technology, not by us. We would like to have a far greater say, together with the community, around some of those choices. So I'll use an example of mathematics. We went to the Department of Higher Education Training. You suggested that we should be knocking on doors of other people. And in the Department of Higher Education Mathematics, the COE here has been part of that discussion, to say we would like to have every single individual, this is before we talk about research, every single individual who teaches maths and statistics at our university to have a doctoral degree. That's not a difficult set of expectations. In fact, that should be a norm in our university system. Okay, we asked, I think, for 100 and something odd million. They gave us 25 to start off with. And that's how that program has started, that you are aware of. And we still want to increase that because we are going back to possibly explore the viability of setting up something similar to a CDT that the UK has. CDT are Centers for Doctoral Training that you find in other systems across the world, but targeting maths and statistics because of the reasons that you've advanced. And so I think we are at idiom around the importance of investing in that particular discipline. Colleagues, choices have to be made. Prof. I'm putting it to you. I'm not Barry, but I put it to you. We could allocate the bulk of our money, of that 900 and, remember that 906 million? It has to fund equipment grants, research grants, it has to run Itemba labs, it has to run, the astronomers are in here, you are the MD of Itemba, it has to run the SAO. That's what that money is supposed to do. I'll be with you. So, we could either allocate our resources purely on the fact that you're able, or you could either say, well, actually, we want our system to be founded on a competitive basis of accessing resources.
Okay, so my answer would be that you say the NRF is operating in a resource-constrained environment and that we are not doing the 1.5% of GDP. So I'm saying if we keep existing activities, say, excellent activities afloat, then we can make it happen that GDP goes beyond that 300 billion.
Okay, thank you. Last time I checked,
I will not argue with the professor, but I have my views on that statement.
I think it's a partial response to the question that was raised by Bruce.
Yes.
Last time you also mentioned the Timber Labs. Just before I left Timber Labs, I put forward a proposal for 1 billion rand extension to our facilities to compete with radio astronomy. What I'm saying about that is that I think for mathematicians and other groups, the physicists, in particular high energy physicists and astrophysicists, have been able, with 3 radio astronomers, to get a 2 billion rand project. So you can find money somewhere, how they did it something else. So you need to, as various classes of community, learn from the Americans how to lobby and actually present a case at various levels to be able, I mean, something that, other groups have been able to do. I think Bruce, that is in response, put a position statement and say, we can't have a country without mathematics. How do we go forward with that? At a much larger scale, like not individual concepts of people, but that's been the culture that other kind of communities, the ecology community has mastered as well. Anyway, Eagle. Eagle. And then I don't see another question I'll go that way. Yes. Bob. Mlapo, are you able to handle 4 questions?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so.
Eagle, 2. And Bhavesh, 4. And I come to you. Okay, 4. There you go.
Thank you. I have come in from the commercial world. My name is Eagle Gledhill. I'm a visiting professor here in engineering and in physics. I'm concerned with what science gives to the economy so that we grow the pot. We do have a problem in that flagship or selected or thematic choices or cluster areas tend to drive out the basic sciences. And the balanced support for the basic sciences was one of the things that the economy needs. I was in a position to ask a vice president of Airbus what South Africa as a country should do for sustainable, radical innovation and resilience in its economic future for science. And his answer was support the basic sciences.
Support the best.
Basics.
No, the best in the basic sciences.
I'm coming to that. I'll be short.
No.
We are in a position, and I know this through SACNAS, professional scientists and evaluation of economic contributions, we apparently do not have enough statisticians to staff Stats SA, enough geologists to objectively quantify our petrochemical resources, and so on. And those aren't basic sciences. What I'm looking for is an assurance that there will be support for basic sciences together with STIs and thematic and flagship sciences.
Please. Yourself.
Thank you so much. My name is Mususo Mkwananzi. I'm a recently qualified demographer and I'm lecturing in the Department of Psychology. I'm a non-rated researcher.
Yeah.
And my question is related to the last point where you spoke about the need to invest in high potential early career researchers. My question is, what is the plan to ensure that this is done? And does that plan include any form of facilitated and sponsored mentorship so that young early researchers are mentored and they do become established researchers?
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bob Scholes. I'm a rated scientist at WITS, but formerly spent nearly a quarter of a century at the CSIR. So I come to this with a kind of a system of innovation perspective. The first point I want to make is that when you're in a resource-constrained environment, and all kinds of institutions end up in that place at some stage in their development, rule number one is you look at efficiencies and you look at recurrent costs. And the degree to which the science community, and my long experience of them, is that they're not unreasonable people. They, when faced with facts, actually tend to make quite, rational decisions. The degree to which they will buy into the agenda you've laid out will depend somewhat on whether they see the NRF actually becoming a more efficient and responsive organization, because our day-to-day experience is that it's going in the opposite direction. So that's a comment. But the other thing that's going to persuade people is that your changes need to be evidence-based. You've laid them out kind of as hypotheses, but they're not really, we've not seen any evidence. For instance, that the efficacy of putting all the money into one big allocatable pool rather than keeping it in quasi-allocated subsets, is that in fact a more efficient solution? It has echoes of the argument about, economies of scale, but I'm deeply unconvinced by those. And we've seen that go backwards and forwards, institute centralization, decentralization. Where's the evidence that one is in fact going to achieve the increases of efficiency that we need, okay, versus the other? The second is an analysis of, what is the actual machinery by which we generate our desired outputs? And if our desired outputs, for instance, is a transformed, emerging, young scientist cadre to take over from the elderly, what is the best way of doing that? Is it in fact to invest in the emerging cadre, or is it to invest in the older cadre that can mentor them?
Or both.
Or both, that's right. So I am agnostic about that. I would like to see the evidence.
Yeah. I thought it was a photo.
If you've got enough bandwidth, we can add more data.
Yeah, no.
I think my point relates to that. I'm a basic medical scientist, also rated, and in our school much of the research is laboratory-based. So we've had the discussions not to take on extra postgraduate students because we don't have the money to run the projects. So there's no use in us, a student arriving with the NRF bursary, but we cannot run the projects. We need those running costs. So I would like to have the assurance that the money that has been taken away from us from our incentive grants are available for us to apply for in a competitive manner. What happened to that money?
What happened to it? They go to Mauritius. All right, let me start with support for basic sciences. And here I'm going to get throttled. Probably the most well endowed of our basic sciences currently is theoretical physics. Experimental and theoretical physics. If you look at from a research point of view, I'm not talking about undergraduate, having geologists at the undergraduate level, engineers. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about postgraduate and research. If you look at the amount of money as a country that we're spending in physics, and experimental physics, which is so the SKA project is put forward as astronomy, but it's predominantly physics, okay? Astrophysics, and that's basic science. It's not about applicability in the narrow sense. And so there is absolutely nowhere, anywhere, where you will find, and I will challenge my good friend, Mr. Scholz, to say evidence will show that we're spending more money in the basic sciences than we are elsewhere, at the postgraduate and research level, not at the undergrad, which is a different issue. So if you want to, I can put my hat on as a former DHED official and talk about undergrads, but that's not the conversation for today. But the commitment to support the basic sciences is not questioned at all. Plans for early career researchers. I will be very happy for the DVC to invite me, because like Bob Scholz is saying, he would like to see evidence. So those policy choices that we put on there on one slide are supported by a slew of evidence that we worked together with every single one of our universities that helped us come to that set of choices. So using evidence to make decisions or to help you make decisions is at the heart of what you and I support. And so we will try, before I say this is our blueprint, in the same way, develop, come, discuss, using the evidence, working together with our universities to say, this is what we desire. If we desire that, these are what we have done before, this is what has worked, this is what not worked, this is what works elsewhere, these are the choices that we are making within the university, and this is how we can complement and make sure that. So hopefully by the end of the year, again, we'll come back and we'll discuss whether those are the appropriate choices. But I agree with you. It is impossible to support and mentor early career researchers in the absence of the established core. You can't do it. So you need both. But you can't put everything in the basket of the established and the high end and not look at your future. You've got to look at both sides. And so that I think is something that I think we're in agreement. And like you, yes, simpler, better, faster, efficiency. All of us, including our respective universities, are striving for the same thing. Including this great university. We're striving for the same thing of efficiency, making sure that things can be done speedily, quickly, without compromising integrity. So I think you will be our conscience as to whether or not we're achieving that level of efficiency that we should. The last one, around what happened to the money.
And also the issue of it doesn't help to support postgraduate students with bursaries if we don't have the running costs
Correct.
to run their projects.
I fully agree with you. So here's one of the discussion items that we're having with our respective universities. We're saying we'll offer a student full cost bursary, but there's no point if there is no running cost on the other side. The tuition fees here at master's level, Robin, is what? Roughly, on average?
I don't know.
Research masters, on average. So let's just say in the Faculty of Science. 25,000. Okay, all right, let's just make it 30 then. Make it 30. But we did, we collected all this data. And we asked the question, what would you say if we were to offer that money that you are giving as a fee rebate to that student at master's and doctoral level, for that money to be used for running costs? So the student then comes, not just with their bursary, but with running money. So that's one option that we are currently discussing with our respective universities.
The universities are resource constrained. Where are they going to get the money?
You are giving the student full cost of study. Okay? And this is, and many universities, by the way, already currently give fee rebates. They say, if you study full-time, doctorate, research, and sometimes masters, you will not pay any tuition fees because they get that money back on graduate. No, I'm saying, I'll give you a list, Christine. There are many universities.
5,000 men wouldn't get this laboratory-based research very far for a student.
Okay. So,
Not in our field.
not in our field. You're in my field. Okay. But that's one option that we have been discussing. The second one is whether we ought to tie research grant to student. So that when you get your research grant, which is, I think, a more difficult one, when you get a research grant, you also get the student.
Grant links one work very well.
Remember,
They stopped doing it.
remember, that grant link currently, you are getting that student, you're giving them a pittance. That student, the bursary value of that student is abominably low. So the principle,
You did increase it this year.
but still, it is still hideously low. So the point I'm making is that at one level, you want to give students what they really need to get through, but you also want to give the bright students, the ones that are committed, the ones that are prepared to, not just somebody who's bored and wants to spend time, because you're going to give fewer. And so the question that you asked about the incentive funding, if you look carefully, it takes time for that additional money to see it in the competitive program, but it is coming back into the competitive program for radio.
We've got 5 minutes left, so just one last question from Parvesh, and then conclude.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Malaka. So I run one of your centers of excellence here, it's the one on TV research. A lot of,
not mine, yours.
A lot of what I wanted to touch on, I think you've commented on, but perhaps I could push you to think a little further. So this idea of supporting early career researchers, and I'd really like to commend you on your thinking of taking somebody from honors to PhD. I'd like you to think about, as you say, from postdoc to an A-rated scientist, right? And so we need to actually reflect on what gains we've made. So the country has had programs like the MRC Career Development Award, the NRF Career Advancement Fellowship. But the thing is, these are too far and few in between, and they also take a person to one level and then effectively just drop things, right? So if we can think about strengthening that as an instrument that already exists, and there is merit in looking at other science systems. I mean, I know we're not America and we're not the NIH, but something like the K Award, and the principle on which the K Award is built on, that you have university commitment, you provide indirect costs, you provide the salary for the researcher, and you pair up with a mentor. These are no basics, they're winners, right? So if we could think about learning from some of these established systems and applying those with the idea of supporting excellence. The second point is, I don't know, I'm tired of this conversation that we don't have money, right? So we don't have money. So can we stop talking like that and start thinking about how we get more money or how we shift our focus, right? And I think that one needs to be a little bit more creative about this, right? So there's money in the world. There's a lot of money in the world, from philanthropists to other organizations. And can we start, the World Bank, the BRICS Bank, can we start thinking more creatively about how we get money? That's the first thing. The second, which is a personal gripe of mine, and I raise it every time, is can we get greater value for the rand? Right? So there's a simple example, and others will bear me out here. If I'm in the US and I want to buy a kit that costs $150, when I come to South Africa, the same kit costs 20,000 rands. Right? There's a disproportionate increase in the cost of doing research in this country. Where does all that money go? Right? There's a lot of profiteering that happens in between. So can we think of things like there's no VAT on research consumables? You get more for your buck. I mean, can we just start thinking more creatively about how we do this? Instead of having this, there's never going to be as much money as we want. Let's just accept that. But can we start being more creative and also recognize that we're not the only science system in the world struggling with this. Everyone is struggling with this, but people are finding a way to make it work. I think we need to think like that.
The gentleman you're sitting next to, I think we have been trying to push Treasury and SARS to remove VAT on academic material, learning material, so journals. Why are we paying VAT? Academic books and the like. And we are trying, and still have not succeeded, 20 years down the line, of setting a national side license for e-journals as a way of pulling and being a lot more creative around stretching the value around. So those are things that not just the National Research Foundation, but our universities under the leadership of Universities South Africa, we have to think and do together. My concluding remark, colleagues, around the early career researchers, you're absolutely right. We are looking at a whole range of other systems across the world. Fortunate for us, we are part of the Global Research Councils where we sit as funding agencies from across the world, and we share what we not necessarily say best practice. We share our own respective experiences and see what works where, and sometimes those things might be applicable in your context. And so those are the very basic things that I fully agree with you. Unless there's a commitment by the university or wherever the individual is going to reside, unless there's a commitment by the individual to say that this is the career that I want to take, unless there is a long-term commitment by the funder to not just take you and give you an international postdoc, but also to put you into an environment which is nurturing, which supports you, properly funded, so that you can have funding for your students and as well as for your research, and a whole range of things, and take you up, if I may use that term, up the ladder, until you hopefully are able to look after yourself. That, I think, is what we would like to bring, hopefully, towards the end of the year for further discussion, based on evidence.
Thank you, Mulapo. I think we'll just conclude. In conclusion, I'd like to first thank you for coming here, because we've been anticipating it here for quite some time now, and you really have given us a presentation which has really stimulated a very rich discussion. In particular, you spoke about, for example, you gave us a panoramic view of the positioning of the National Research Foundation within the constellation. I think that even your language reflects the funding mechanism of the national science innovation systems in the country, and the kind of choices that you have to make. For me, what I concluded for me, which I think was planned to go forward, is clearly you've been drip feeding everyone. So there's going to be, especially at post-graduate level, a narrowing of the well, but making it deeper. So invariably, there will be winners and losers, right? Meaning that it's going to be competitive, it's going to be harder to get grants, but those that are going to be funded will be funded well. So again, there will be a situation where it's going to be difficult to get a grant, but if you're funded, you'll be funded well. I think this aligns with other funding systems in the world, given the kind of set of competing demands. And secondly, there will be a breaking of silos within the system to start moving things within how the NRF has been allocated. And thirdly, of course, looking beyond just the line department, but other departments to ensure that we meet our NSI needs. And I think these are things that we take back and reflect, and I do expect that sometime around the end of the year or early next year, this will be part of the conversation. I don't see this process as just being concluded here, but part of the ongoing process to actually help you and help us in how we can, meander around this complex space.
Colleagues, I really want to thank you as well, Professor Vilakazi and colleagues. I say this with humility. We work for you. We accept all criticism, positive and otherwise, as part and parcel of us building a better and a stronger system. The reason why we're here is not just merely to share, or for that matter to account, but it is also to listen, to learn, and to make sure that what we are doing actually resonates with what we all collectively accept as the things that should be done. And so whatever we do, if it does not work for our university system, then clearly something is not right. But I really want to thank you and look forward to another one of these discussions maybe towards the end of the year.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you very much.
Bye, Good as well. Yeah? So I could have stayed in the office. Yeah.
I'll hold back.
Raspberries are good. So